Welcome, welcome. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen.
Hey,
Here we are. So we are actually ending up, as you can see, this is the maftir. Look at this, of Numbers, of that first Parsha of Numbers. And we are discussing the responsibilities of the family of Kahat, right? One of the three Levitical families, and the tribe of Kahat was given the most sacred objects to transport. So there's some special considerations involved here in terms of how you approach these things and the level of respect with which these things have to be treated. And the consequences are great, are very great, because basically we're told that if they touch these things or they look on these things, even, in terms of when the Mishkan was taken down and put back up, that there was a death at the hands of heaven for doing this, for showing that level of disrespect. So let's go on with this now. Vaidaber Hashem, God spoke, El Moshe ve'el Aharon lemor, to Moses and to Aaron, saying. So I will tell you that even though it says to Moses and to Aaron, there is a very important drush in the Mechilta. It's one of the very first, it's a halachic midrash on the book of Exodus. And I believe it's almost the very first interpretation, which talks about the fact that when it says in the Torah to Moses and to Aaron, do not take that literally. Do not take that literally. Essentially, what it's going to say is that this is going to involve, in other words, this whatever mitzvah is going to involve Aaron as well. But and they say, of course, they ask all kinds of questions, which is why wouldn't we take it literally? And basically, there are places where it talks about with Moses, God trusts Moses on a level with no other human being. There are several places, maybe three places, where you have to understand that it was to Moses and Aaron because the context forces you to believe that, to interpret it that way. I don't believe this is one of those cases. And there are places where it talks about God speaking directly to Aaron. So well, why mention Aaron? And the answer is to give Aaron honor, to let us know just how worthy Aaron was, despite the fact that God, in this particular case, and in many, many other cases, did not speak to him directly. So that's to discuss this because it says to both of them. Al tichretu et shevet mishpachot kahati. Do not cause to be cut off the tribe of the family of the Kohatites of Kohat, mitoch ha-Leviim, from amongst the Levites. Now the tribe, of course, was the Levite tribe, but there was this family that was part of these three families that comprised the tribe of Levites. So here we go, Rashi. Al tachritu. So he says, Al tegarmu lahem sheamutu. Do not cause them that they should die. In other words, and we'll see what they need to do in order to prevent that from happening. I believe that's it. Bezot asulahem. So this is what you need to do for them, v'chayu, so that they remain alive, v'lo yamutu, and that they do not die. As we say this, okay, well, let me finish the sentence. Forgive me. There's a thought that I have with that. Begishtam et kodesh hakodashim, when they draw near to the Holy of Holies, the most sanctified objects. Aaron ahavanav yavo, first of all, Aaron and his sons should come. V'samu utam ish alavodato, and they shall place each one of them. In other words, Aaron and his sons need to designate to the members of the family of Kahat al avodato their particular task, the El Masao, and as to what they need to carry, the burden that they're going to have. So here is the thought that I have, if I haven't forgotten it at this point. Oh my gosh, amazing. Let's see. Forgive me. Sorry, slipped my mind now. Sorry about that. Okay. If it comes back to me, I'll mention it. So that they not come to see when literally this is going to mean when the sanctified items are swallowed. This literally means swallowed. Now, the Aramaic is nechasan, means covered, and Rashi's going to explain it that way. It's just interesting that so that when these sanctified objects are covered up, vametu, that they die. So remember, I said even looking at these things in an inappropriate kind of way. So just a very interesting detail involved here. Oh, I know what I was going to tell you. Comes back to me now. The fact is that in the census of the Levites, we notice that the number of Levites is out of proportion in terms of how small that tribe is. And it raises an interesting question. I mean, very seriously, because you'll see that the Levites are counted they're not counted from 20 years old and up. They're counted maybe 5 years old and up, something like that, or less. In other words, you'd think there'd be more Levites because more Levites are included in the count, and yet the tribe is so small. And I think the answer is related to what we are reading here. Not that they necessarily were contravening the notion of respect, but the fact that there's something involved in being sanctified and involved in sanctified, very sanctified work that maybe takes you out of this life in a way. And there's a suggestion here then that is something beyond, that maybe there's something so much better, so much, I mean, indescribable compared to the life of this world. And that the Levites were, in a sense, blessed in the fact that their lifespans tended to be on the short side, which is, of course, quite a surprising way of looking at things. But there is no other reason why the Levites should be so small in number. And I do, as you know, I do believe that the Torah wants us to understand that this life is not the be all and end all, because we know what abuses take place when one has, or can take place when one sees life that way. And of course, the fact that life has become so comfortable for us in comparison to what it was centuries ago or even 100 years ago. And that what's happened as a result, of course, is that we want to hold on to this life and make it the be all and end all. At any rate, that's the story there. Before I take something else, because we have quite a bit of time, are there any questions? I'll stop the share for a moment and see if any of you would like to say anything or comment or anything. Any thoughts? Harlan?
If we obey the commandments
Yes.
and pray to God every day, I think we'll have a long life and we'll be a happy a Jewish family. I just feel that the war on coming now with Hamas is very difficult. I can't understand it, and I hope that we can get rid of Hamas without hurting any Arab people too much. I'm just fear about the war, and I hope it ends soon.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean, it's even getting rid of these ideas of hatred and unkindness and there's some famous statement. Oh well, there's that famous story. I guess it's famous. I'm trying to think. I think it was Chastai ibn Shaprut. I may have actually mentioned this. where he was like Grand Vizier I think possibly in Spain, and he was very, very close to the Sultan. And of course, in those situations, people with that position had, could take people's lives with impunity. They could punish people with capital punishment without having to account for it. At any rate, so the vizier and Chasta ibn Shaprut were walking along one day, excuse me, and this one man just jumped out and said in front of both of them, you know, to Chasta ibn Shaprut, "You're a wicked human being. I hate you. Uh, you should be executed. You've done such terrible things, etc." And the Sultan turned to Chasta ibn Shaprut and said, you should rip out the tongue of this particular man. So Chastai, and then they went on, and Chastai ibn Shaprut did some research and discovered that this person was really suffering very greatly. And so Chastai ibn Shaprut went to some trouble and tried to see what he could do to help this person and as best as he could. And one day the vizier and the Chastai ibn Shaprut were walking out, and the same man jumped out and said, "Chastai ibn Shaprut, I thank you. You are such a kind and generous and great human being." And the Sultan turned to Chastai and said, "I thought I told you to rip out his tongue." And Chastai ibn Shaprut said, "I did. I ripped out his evil tongue and replaced it with a good tongue." So rather than destroy human beings, the real challenge is whether or not they can change their hearts and whether they can replace a narrative which is a deadly narrative and a cruel narrative with a narrative that is filled with kindness and that says we're all brothers and sisters, we're all family, we have responsibilities for one another, to take care of one another, and to see what we can do to live together in harmony and peace. And that's the real challenge. It's not just ridding ourselves. And of course, how difficult that really is. It's so, so difficult. But that would be the best thing in the world. So I wish I could say that being kind necessarily gets people to be appreciative. So, yes, Neshama.
I'm so pleased that you told us that that tale um, about the part that meant the most to me was I ripped out his evil tongue and I replaced it with a compassionate one because um, first of all he was thinking on his feet, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He didn't skip a beat, it sounds like. and and second of all, when you sometimes when you we are sometimes when kindness is someone sometimes when I worked in a mental hospital for
Mm.
a long part of my career,
Wow.
and a locked psychiatric hospital in Napa,
Yes.
and and many times people had terrible, they had lives that where bad things were done to them. For
Right.
example, maybe sexual abuse was perpetrated on them because
Right.
the person had it perpetrated on. Anyways, just a very bad chain of generational trauma. And but when you bestow kindness and compassion and teaching and learning and education and and love and art and dance and opportunities to have a different experience in life, people can be turned around. So I loved the story you told us.
Hmm. Did you ever see this happening in your work?
Well, some people had been there for years and years and living there years and years before I ever arrived. But in the short term, I did see it. Long term, I wasn't always there. But yes, in the long term, there were some people who were still living there working to get to the outside,
Hmm.
and 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 they had completely turned their lives around because they had a spiritual leader for just about every denomination of religious observance. So they had that as well. There was spiritual care. So we did see people who had completely turned their lives around and were working to convince the court system that
Mm,
they
yeah,
so yeah,
that's good.
not I wasn't there for as long as some people, from the beginning of admission to the hospital.
Mm.
But yes, I witnessed many life-changing experiences that people could describe.
Mm. It's so good to know. It really is. I can tell you that it seems to me, and it's not 100%, but then what in life is 100%, but that so many people so appreciate kindness, talking to them in a kind way, it's amazing. It's like a balm. It really is. And it occurs to me, where it says, Kilo lam chastor, for his kindness endures forever, referring to God in that way. And that, when that song about all the world needs now is love, sweet love. Well, love is a one syllable word, so it's helpful. But I really think what the world needs is kindness,
Mm-hmm.
sweet kindness. And if, unfortunately, it won't fit in the song so well, but I really think that's what you need is kindness. And just thinking twice about a sarcastic word or an ironic word. Anyway, that's yep, yep. So referring to what Harlan was sharing, it's just that's the greatest tragedy. I'm going to go ahead and screen share again, and we're going to, because we have some time, I'm going to go into Torah Tamima, and we're going to go back to Bereshit where we left off. And so that's what I'm going to try and share with you now. And here we are. So this is, remember, God has created Eve and brought her to Adam. And this is what Adam says when he sees her. This is verse 23. Let's find it here. Vayomer ha'adam, the man said, Zot hapam, this time, etzem me'atzmi, bone of my bone, uvasar mibsari, and flesh of my flesh. Lazot yikare isha, this one shall be called woman, ki me'ish lukocha, because she was taken from a man. Zot. Okay, let's see. Yeah, because this one was taken from a man. So of course, saying this time suggests, of course, that there must have been other times. And that's what we're going to have to analyze. Zot hapal. Amar Rabbi Elazar. Rabbi Elazar said, as opposed to Rabbi Eliezer, this is Elazar. Rabbi Elazar said, "My dichtiv zot hapam." What does it mean that it states, that the verse states, this time etzimatzmi uvasar masari, that this one is bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh? Look at the idea of being unified, right? Melamed, this teaches, and of course, if you're not familiar with this drush, you're going to be astounded. Okay, Melamed, Sheba Adam al kol behema v'chaya, that the man came to every to all cattle and wild beasts, v'lo nidkarara da'ato, but he wasn't satisfied, ad sheba al chava, until he came on Eve, which does suggest that he was engaging with some kind of sexual intercourse. But let's see how Torah Tamima handles that. I think that is, in fact, a very common understanding of this, that the truth was that there was something in that intercourse that he had with Eve that brought a deep level of satisfaction that he did not have with with other animals. And I think there's some profound thought behind that regarding the nature of how compelled we are to engage in sexual intercourse and the degree to which people do it, and in fact do things that are, let's put it this way, not necessarily appropriate. and whether or not that really is satisfying, and whether or not the fact that he was with Eve and the idea of bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh is saying something actually very, very deep. That while the physical act of sexual intercourse may in fact be satisfying to some extent, it isn't truly satisfying. And there's something about being truly satisfied that Adam had with Eve when this happened. And that this is really what Rabbi Elazar is trying to teach us. So let's just take a look. Still, let me make sure I found the place. Yes, this is it over here. Ritzono Lamar. So here we go. This is Torah Tmimus understanding. Shechashav uvikesh lo zug mikol habruim, that he was considering and seeking for himself a mate from all the creatures. V'lo nachdato, but he wasn't satisfied ad shematza et Chava, until he found Eve. So in other words, he was yearning for a mate, and didn't find one until he found Eve. So here he goes. He says, lefaresh kipshuto. He says, you cannot understand this as it sounds. In other words, basically the way I just interpreted it, right? As many do. He's not happy with that. Shaharei mevu'ar ba'avodah zara. He says it's clarified in the tractate Avodah Zara. It's a tractate in the Talmud, and page 22b. Uvachama makomot, that in several places, other places, the behema mit akeret mibiat adam. It says that if a human being has intercourse with an animal, the animal is sterile. It's rendered sterile. So that's his argument. The Eila habehemot, the chayot, and these particular cattle and wild animals, shemime habriya, from the days of creation, finding the place, halo holidu letachlit kiyum hamin. They, in fact, of course, continue to procreate for the sake of the existence of that particular species. So he says, based on that, to say that Adam literally had intercourse with these animals is not accurate because they weren't rendered sterile, and that's the reason. So it doesn't, of course, say explicitly that he did, although Ba'al so-and-so that expression is used to indicate intercourse. But it's here for your consideration. And of course, Torah Tamima is taking this in a far more, quote, historical, if you want to call that word, or literal point of view. And I would understand it more from a literary point of view, and that it isn't necessarily saying this is what happened, but rather that the Torah understands itself as literature. And that's not to say that it isn't based in some historical way. I mean, we know that there is such a thing called historical fiction, and that this is the way of the Torah trying to teach us really valuable levels of understanding. So that's for your consideration. And I think this is a good place for us to stop for this time. And we will continue, God willing, with this tomorrow. So I'm going to stop the share. Any comments for the record before I stop the recording? Harlan.
Yeah. Don't forget that without intercourse, we would never be here. So a man and a woman love each other. That's wonderful. And all the rabbis used to say, please get more children, get for the Jewish,
I know who you were listening to, Harlan.
Yeah. So that's the reason I wanted to bring that up.
Well, we are told to be fruitful and multiply, and that will come up eventually. And obviously any other kind of sexual intercourse does not, does not produce children, and that raises a whole other philosophical question as to the nature of that intercourse. So that's not for us to discuss at this point. I'm going to stop the recording, but thank you.